From NJ.com, this is Talk is Cheap, a New York Giants podcast. We're talking Big Blue football all year round.
Welcome aboard, Giants fans, to Talk is Cheap, or New York Giants podcast on NJ.com. I'm Joe Giglio, joined by Dan Duggan, James Kratch. They cover the Giants for NJ Events Media. And we're having a podcast here, one I think we all thought one day down the line we would have. I just didn't think it would be the end of November 2017. Eli Manning has been benched by the Giants. His tenure with the Giants is effectively over. The Giants are a tire fire. They're getting ripped by every ex-player, every ex-Eli Manning teammate. My head is still spinning, Jays. We're doing this podcast on a Wednesday morning. This all went down Tuesday afternoon. The Giants, of course, last played Thursday night, a little less than a week ago, Thanksgiving night in D.C. against the Redskins. Bad game, uninspiring game, but I had no thought it would be our next conversation. James, I'll just start us off by saying I think the Giants embarrassed themselves here. I think this organization I called them rudderless about a month ago. They're worse than that now. Outside the Browns, who are in their own category, I feel like the Giants have become the biggest laughingstock in the NFL, and now they take the one guy everyone has respect for, and they basically throw him under the bus. It's just amazing how far this thing has fallen so fast.
No, Tuesday was the breaking point. I think that the remarkable benefit of the doubt that the Giants organization has enjoyed from their fans and in the area for so long, it's gone. I think that, and what really I think was kind of astounding about Tuesday and the decision was, people are ripping Ben McAdoo, they're ripping Jerry Reese. Most of the fan base, they've moved past those guys, and they are going after John Mara. I think John Mara, has lost all credibility as a Giants owner with all the stuff that's gone on off the field, the mediocrity on the field, the 41-50 since the last Super Bowl, and now to do this to Manning. And, it seems to be, to do this on a Wednesday, this spin starts to be coming out. Eli, we were going to let him start, but, he decided, no, to suggest that Eli Manning benched himself is insane. The Giants, you're right, Joe, they've disgraced themselves. They've embarrassed themselves. And I think that, look, maybe there was an argument to be made that at some point you had to go find out what Davis Webb can do. But to go to Geno Smith now, and look, this is not Geno's fault, as we'll get into, but it just goes to show you this team that they're ready, fire, aim. They have no planning, because any of us could have said weeks ago, and we did, hey, start getting Davis Webb ready to play. They clearly haven't done that yet. And for Ben McAdoo to come out and be like, oh, well, we got eliminated from the playoffs, now we must do this. I mean, they knew they were going nowhere for months. So I think you're right. They've embarrassed themselves. I don't see how I don't see how Reese and McAdoo can survive this long term. I think John Mara has a tremendous amount of work to do to rebuild a trust with the fan base. And it's just going to be weird. I mean, Eli Manning is basically, he's here, but he's not here anymore. And I think it's going to be a very, very awkward, infuriating for many 5-week stand this season.
Dan, I know you wrote about the angle of Davis Webb not having him ready compared to Geno. I think it's one thing if the Giants presented this as Davis Webb is our future, even if the fans didn't believe that. They could sell that, like maybe he is our future. We got to see him play. The season's over, blah, blah, blah. The fact that Geno Smith will be the next quarterback to start a game for the Giants after Eli Manning, it's just flabbergasting that this is the way this plan was unfolded.
Yeah, I mean, it's really just insulting to everyone's intelligence, insulting to Eli personally. It makes no sense, and it just shows how rudderless this franchise has become. Again, I'm relatively new to the Giants and to covering the team, and they always have had this great reputation, and they just seem intent, at least the past 2 years, and obviously going back a little further, in just completely destructing that, because they just make bad decision after bad decision. And, like James said, we've been talking about this for weeks that, listen, once it went 0-5 and Odell's out for the season, you know that you're not coming back from that. No one was saying at that point you should play Davis Webb over Eli. But it would have been a lot easier to stomach if they slowly built Davis Webb up to be the number 2 quarterback, and then maybe he gets that garbage time drive against the blowout against the Rams, and he's at least inching towards this. And again, you don't have to pull the rug out from Eli Manning and put in Geno Smith, who, I mean, of all people, again, as James says, it's not his fault. He's done everything right since he's been here. But please, there's the idea that they're trying to see what he can do for this franchise in 2018 is just a joke. And it's just a waste of everybody's time. I mean, these games are meaningless, but at least, you can spin it with Davis Webb that, well, we're trying to evaluate him, give us a little more information, because, I mean, they're going to be in position to, to draft a top quarterback. I mean, there's nothing to be gained by playing Geno Smith. So they should have been getting Webb ready. And then Eli would kind of see it coming, because that's the thing that shocked me, is how shocked Eli was. I mean, he did not see this coming at all. And it just goes back to how terrible of a communicator Ben McAdoo is. It's not just in the press conferences. It's in the locker room. It's in the meeting rooms. He just doesn't know how to connect with his players. He has this, what I say goes, and he's in his own little bubble and doesn't understand how things impact, the bigger picture. And it's not just about X's and O's. There's so much more that goes into, coaching a football team. And to see Eli Manning standing up there fighting back tears, which, it was tough to watch. I mean, it's just, I put the video up on Twitter, and I got tons of fans saying, I hate the Giants, I hate Eli, but this is sad. People still, just felt for the guy. There wasn't going to be an easy way to handle, this eventual changing of the guard, but the Giants somehow managed to pick the worst way. And it should be a surprise based on their reputation, but it really isn't, because they've been so clumsy with how they've handled pretty much everything on the PR front. Again, I'm going to say the last 2 years, but, as James referenced, it goes back further than that.
How do they let this happen, James? How does John Mara and Jerry Reese let this go the way it did? I'm just trying to go to the decision here. Let's talk about that for a second. Then we'll get to the fallout and what happens next with the Giants and Eli's career. But just from a PR standpoint, John Mara, I remember McAdoo a few weeks ago, you guys in a postgame, he was asked about Eli and maybe another quarterback playing, and he referenced that it wouldn't just be a spur-of-the-moment decision. So I can't imagine McAdoo woke up Tuesday and just said, I'm doing this, I'm not telling anybody. This had to go through other channels here, whether it be Reese and Mara, or at least Reese. How did the group of Giants executives and owner say, you know what, screw it, this is the best way to do it?
That's a great question. I mean, look, I think that's like this whole idea, and I think very few people are pushing this. It's not like Jerry Reese and Ben McAdoo pulled a coup on John Mara when he was at a meeting. That's not what happened. John Mara clearly signed off on this. And if they're going to use the excuse of, well, we told Eli he could start the first half, and he said no. I mean, that's the most – it boggles my mind that anyone in their right mind thought that was a good plan. And you know what? It almost seems like they knew Eli would say no, so there's their out. What I go to what Dan said, the fact that John Mara has, as of Wednesday morning at 10:11 a.m. when we're taping this, has not addressed the fans publicly is ridiculous. And honestly, he should have left the NFL owners meeting in New York and come, and he should have announced it, because Ben McAdoo going up there and saying our number one goal is to win football games, but now we're going to evaluate Geno Smith, was possibly, and this is saying something, the most ridiculous thing that has come out of his mouth this year. I mean, are you trying to win football games, or are you trying to evaluate the young players? You're clearly trying to evaluate the young players because you're 2-9, you're going nowhere. I get that. Just say it. Don't give the fans this crap of we're trying to win football games. I mean, come on. There's no way that anyone can objectively say that Geno Smith, nothing against Geno, even Davis Webb, nothing against Davis Webb, gives the Giants a better chance to win a football game on Sunday than Eli Manning.
And that goes
Absolutely
back.
No way you can say that.
As far as the winning the games, that goes back to how ridiculous, as you touched on, that plan was, that Eli was going to start the first half and then come hell or high water to start the second half. This isn't a preseason game. And of course Eli turned that plan down. Again, like you said, anyone trying to spin this as Eli benched himself is completely out in left field, because again, he said, if I'm the starting quarterback, I'm prepared to win the game. And then you're going to tell me at halftime I'm coming out. What if the Giants are up, by a touchdown at halftime? You're going to take him out, even though you're saying you're trying to win the game. It's so foolish. But again, you wouldn't expect anything less from this organization at this point, because they just botch everything, even the simple things. Now, this isn't a simple thing, but they seem to just botch everything lately. And that plan is just crazy. It's insulting. And I mean, I know Eli's streak makes it a little bit more complicated, but credit to him for just saying, listen, I'm not going to just run out there to continue the streak. I mean, because again, it's ultimately meaningless. I mean, it has value in terms of when you look at his legacy, but if he starts 216 games or 210 games or whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. So I mean, again, credit to him, but that plan was just so foolish that you're going to have him start the first half. Again, they haven't looked very good in many first halves, but if they're winning, you're still going to pull them and then try to spin that it's about winning games. I mean, I don't know how the rest of the locker room is going to react to this. I mean, none of the, real leaders were in there yesterday. I mean, if this team really has any leaders at this point. But how do you tell them that we're trying to win games, but we're going to go play this guy who, completely flamed out the Jets and replace, a highly respected 2-time Super Bowl MVP? It's just a complete mess. And again, it's kind of par for the course with, this administration.
What I want to know too is, okay, so let's say that Eli had agreed to their plan. I mean, were they going to come up and be front about it, or were we going to get to Oakland and all of a sudden Geno was going to come out in the second half and, no one would have any explanation, and then McAdoo was going to pull his State Secrets Act after the game. Oh, it was a coaching decision, blah, blah. I mean, what, again, do they think these things, no, they don't think these things through. We should stop giving them the benefit of the doubt. They have botched too many of these situations. And it's just, Dan is right. It's mind-boggling. Look, there's an argument to be made that this is the right thing in the grand scheme of things because Eli, they need to look at Webb and they need to know what they need to do for the draft. And maybe Eli's time has come here and maybe they need to move on. That's fine. All good things end badly. Otherwise they wouldn't end. But to do it this way just, I think, speaks from the incompetence from top to bottom of this organization. It is really a microcosm of what a embarrassment the Giants have become.
And it speaks to me that I don't think John Mara anymore has a grasp on what he's doing with his own team, because the first thought I had when this happened was, like, well, are they tanking? Do they want to lose every game the rest of the season to ensure a high pick to take the quarterback, which we've seen before. I mean, the Colts basically did that when they said, Peyton, you might be healthy, you might not. Let's just go sit down. We're fine. And they got Andrew Luck out of the deal. I don't know. The Giants went out to L.A. a couple weeks ago. They saw Josh Rosen. They saw Sam Darnold. Maybe that's in the back of their mind. Like, you know what? Screw this. Let's get the third pick at worst, and let's get one of these quarterbacks and move on here anyway. But if that's the case, how could they be doing this with Jerry Reese and Jerry Reese and, Ben McAdoo there? It's almost like Mara is allowing two guys in Reese and McAdoo, Dan, that we don't think will be back, or at least one won't be back, maybe both. I don't know. But, how could you let these guys make the decision when they might not even be here next year?
Yeah, I think, once we kind of get through the, maybe the emotion of the Eli decision and all that, and because, again, as James kind of touched on, ultimately, in a football sense, they have to do this. They've done it probably in the worst way imaginable, but it totally makes sense that, I think we all believe this is going to be a one-game situation where Geno starts and then Webb gets the last 4 games. That makes sense. It's a cold, hard business. You need to see what you have in a young quarterback before you potentially draft one, in the top 3. All that makes sense. It's still, the big question for me is McAdoo and Jerry Reese, obviously, depending on, we have to get to the bottom of this, whose idea was it initially? I'm inclined to believe it's McAdoo because he's made it pretty clear, and I documented this on Monday night. He's never been a huge Eli fan. It's not the type of quarterback he wants running his offense. He's never shied away from throwing Eli under the bus while he goes to great lengths, to protect other players and even himself. He only recently started pointing the finger at himself. Never hesitated to point it at Eli, whose, resume, puts McAdoo's to shame. But so the thing I always said was, I can't see McAdoo making this move because, listen, at the end of the day, he's trying to save his job. If they go 2-14, that looks a lot worse than 6-10 and fighting and scrapping and winning a couple of those NFC East games at the end of the year. So, I mean, he's punting on these last 5 games. There's no other way to look at it. I mean, there's no, again, we touched on it. There's no way you can say.
Trying to win, Dan.
There's no way you can say what this decision does gives him the best chance to win as many games to save his hide. So it makes you wonder if he has some sort of assurance from ownership. Listen, you're going to be here. You're going to be part of this evaluation going forward. So this is what we need to do as an organization. We don't know exactly the kind of chain of command and how those conversations went. Obviously, we asked McAdoo, and he stonewalled, which is, par for the course for him. Clearly everyone's on board. There's no way. I mean, the notion that John Mara, again, like James said, is just like off at the meetings and Jerry and Ben got together and said, hey, we're going to do this. And they announced it, and John Mara got caught with his pants down. That didn't happen. He obviously was involved. There's no way, he would allow this decision to happen, without him signing off on it. So we know that much has happened. We don't know exactly how much, he pushed for it, or if something was totally brought to him by McAdoo and Mara kind of shrugged his shoulders. I think the other thing to keep in mind, which, maybe a bit Machiavellian, but maybe it's the smartest move by Mara to say, yeah, hey, you guys make this move. We support you 100%. And then bang, January 1st, you drop the axe on McAdoo and Reese. And now you bring in a new regime, which doesn't have the blood on their hands of, running the beloved quarterback out of town because it's already been done. I mean, and McAdoo and Reese are going to have to deal with this backlash for the next 5 weeks. So then you bring in, let's say, Josh McDaniels and Nick Caserio. And hey, Eli's already gone. He's already been marginalized. It's just a matter of do you trade him, do you cut him? They don't open their tenure with this, this stain on them of, because people are gonna hold this against the Giants and against McAdoo and against Reese and Mara for a long time, just based on the comments I've seen. And I've gotten tweets and emails that I'm a 50-year Giants fan and this might be it for me. I mean, I think most of those people will kind of, come down from the emotions of yesterday. But I do think that would be kind of brilliant if they really are that cunning. Let McAdoo and Reese take the fall, take all the public backlash. I mean, obviously some of it is going to get the ownership, but then you're helping the next regime come in and not have to deal with this, which is obviously a very ugly situation as we found out. I don't know if they're even that smart. I mean, that would be a little Machiavellian, but that's the biggest question though, is the fact that McAdoo and Reese are, involved in this and signed off on this. What does that say about their future? And we don't know. And that's what's going to be fascinating to see, how that part of it plays out.
It's my favorite theory so far. Before you go on, James, that theory by Dan's my favorite one so far, especially when you add in what you said a few minutes ago, James, that as of this moment, as we do this podcast, it's just been silence from John Mara. I mean, he's letting these two guys hang out in the wind, and I have seen almost everyone has ripped the Giants here, ripped McAdoo, ripped Reese, and I mean, it's all right what they're saying. I mean, if it's not for Eli Manning, I know he's not the same player he was 5-6 years ago, but if it's not for Eli Manning, Ben McAdoo's not a head coach. And, Aaron Rodgers, too, with Ben McAdoo. But he's not a head coach because Eli helped sign off on him becoming the head coach, taking over for Tom. And if it's not for Eli Manning, Jerry Reese doesn't have a job as a GM in the NFL. Like, this guy is one of the most overrated GMs I've ever seen in New York. He has 2 championships, and they're both because Eli Manning went on incredible runs in the postseason. Otherwise, he's just a 500 GM for 10 years.
Getting it to McAdoo, like, that's what I want to know. When McAdoo got hired as the head coach, the Giants had just signed Eli to a 4-year extension. I mean, did he tell John Mara that, hey, like, I don't think Eli can really run my offense? I mean, Eli pushed for Ben to get the job. So what the hell has happened there? I mean, I don't know how McAdoo, I mean, did he come out and say this? And that's why John Mara's allowed him to do this? Or did basically Ben McAdoo act like, oh, yeah, Eli, he's perfect for my offense. And all of a sudden, the offensive line stunk. And all of a sudden he started, why isn't Eli Aaron Rodgers? Now, look, I do think that in this sense, John Mara, if he does clean house, can do a GM search and a coaching search. And he basically can say, look, guys, let me prove how hands-off I will be, how I will let you guys do your job. I let these two guys bench Eli Manning and run him out of New York. That goes to show you how I will let you do what you want. And I think that there could be some truth to it. But what I come back to is that, okay, so you've done this move. He still is under contract for 2 years. You're still taking a cap hit. He has a no-trade clause. It just seems like this was not thought out at all. And now they've done it this way. The fan base is on fire. I mean, the alumni are up to here. I mean, I don't think they necessarily realize that they have so many bridges that they have to repair. And to be honest with you, I think Dan's right. There is some thought of, did they assure McAdoo and Reese that they have a future? I don't see how they can repair this break and bring those two guys back. It just seems like it's a bridge too far now. So if they've assured the GM and the head coach they're coming back, and no matter what happens over the final 5 weeks, that's what they're going to say at the end of the year, then they should move to LA and go play in the Chargers Stadium, because that might be the only building they can fill.
Is it over, guys? Is Eli Manning's tenure over? I mean, I saw the odds came out that I wrote about them. Vegas put some odds out for next year. The Jaguars. We'll get into Eli's future, and where he might go next year, because I don't think he's done playing, even though he's not the player he once was. Dan, is it over now? Because Ben McAdoo yesterday kind of threw out the notion that maybe it's not over. Maybe this is just for now. I'm under the impression Eli Manning will never start a game for the Giants again. I just don't know how you come back from what they did yesterday. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, the way I would say it, you can't unbench a quarterback with Eli Manning's credentials. This isn't some guy who it's, Trevor Siemian, who maybe next year the Broncos can, let him compete and win the job. Not Eli Manning, not what he's meant, not what he's accomplished. I mean, it doesn't even really matter to me if you bring in a new coach and a new GM. Maybe that's the only chance it happens. But even so, he still has to show up to work knowing that John Mara and Steve Tisch signed off on this as well. So he still has to, have some hard feelings there. And I just, like I said, I just don't feel like you can, the word I'll use is unbench. I mean, once you make this decision, I mean, Ben McAdoo started talking, and it's funny because he's so tight-lipped, and when he slips up, it's amazing. When he starts talking about quarterbacks not getting the opportunity to decide when they move on, it's like, wait a second, you're telling us, like, after you just said all this stuff about, it's about the future and it doesn't mean the end of Eli, and then you're telling us that, it's he's not speaking about Eli specifically, but saying Hall of Fame quarterbacks don't always get to choose when they move on. And he quickly caught himself. I'm not saying we're moving on. Well, yes, you are, Ben. That's exactly what you started to say. And you caught yourself. But I think the thing is, I mean, the question was asked, kind of point blank again to McAdoo, like, forget exactly how it was worded, but just something about, could Eli be the starting quarterback in 2018? And he said time will tell. I mean, that's not a yes. And then I felt kind of bad. I had to ask Eli, sometimes, you got to ask the question. I mean, I shouldn't say I felt bad, but the guy's hurting, and he doesn't. It's the last thing he wants to get asked. But again, it's news. You got to ask it. I said, because it's hanging out there, do you think this is, you've started your last game for the Giants? And he, repeated, I don't know, twice, and then just said, taking a week at a time. But again, the fact that he didn't say, no, I know I'll be back next year. I mean, because he knows the reality. He's seen his brother go through it. He's seen plenty of guys go through it. Once this decision is made, there's no going back on it. It's irreversible. And just his situation, he's going to be 37. His play has declined. He has a $5 million roster bonus due the third day of the league year in 2018. There's so many factors that it's just, there's no way that they're going to, try to smooth things over. It's not even worth it. Just let him go. I mean, at this point, again, I don't. He has the no trade clause. He has all the leverage in the world. I would think that they end up just having to cut him because if I'm the Jaguars, I say, well, we're not going to give anything up for him. We'll just make him force your hand, and that way we can, come to a different contract, not have to take those huge cap hits, whatever it may be. I think that's how it ends. I just really struggle to see any scenario, where he's back with the Giants next season.
James, I want to talk about Eli's reaction yesterday, what you guys thought. I know, Dan, you were at the locker, the video. How did you think Eli handled all this? Because it was obviously a day that came much quicker than we anticipated, and I'm sure Eli anticipated, and I'm sure everyone there outside of maybe Ben McAdoo and Jerry Reese anticipated. What did you make of just that surreal scene yesterday at the Giants facility?
I mean, it was the end of an era. I mean, I thought Eli reacted, you could tell that this means something to him. Eli's a guy who has never shown a lot of emotion in his career, and he's been knocked for that sometimes. Because people want the fiery, quarterback leader, and he's never been that guy that, a guy like Tom Brady is. But, I mean, he wanted to be a Giant for life. And Ben McAdoo and Jerry Reese took that away from him. And I think that it's fitting that he kind of reacted, getting emotional the way when Tom Coughlin left. I mean, look, the bottom line is this. Giants fans will look at it and say that Eli Manning and Tom Coughlin have taken a fall before Jerry Reese and Ben McAdoo, and that's not right. And I think that it's hard to kind of disagree with the fans for feeling that way. The Giants, this has not gone well the past 6 years, and people keep on being pushed aside. Kevin Gilbride, Perry Fewell, Tom Coughlin, now Eli Manning. And there's a lot of people, Giants fans and people around the Giants, who feel that Jerry Reese is to blame for this all. And yet he still has a job. And I think that that's what you kind of saw. This is a guy who's a Giant, and it was taken away from him on Tuesday. And I don't know what the future necessarily holds for him. I've always felt, I've said this on the podcast, I thought Eli would be a Giant until he retired, just because I didn't think Eli ever wanted to play for another team. He said that. And I didn't think the Giants would ever put the screws to him like they have. But, uncharted waters, 2-9, things change. So my guess is that if Eli wants to play, he's not going to play here. I mean, it would take some ridiculous scenario for him to stay here. I mean, I think it's shot because, as Dan said, John Mara can't claim that he's not responsible for this. I mean, there's blood on his hands too. Not like he can claim that, Ben and Jerry pulled one over on me and I'm so sorry. I mean, you're not going to rehire Ernie Accorsi as the general manager. You're not going to go let a 37-year-old Eli Manning handpick a head coach. So, yeah, I think Eli's moving on, and Dan's right. He's got the Giants. I mean, $5 million roster bonus, the no trade clause. These Giants fans who are like, oh, we're going to get something for Eli. You're not getting anything for Eli. You're going to be forced to cut Eli, and then he's going to go choose his team where he wants to play, if he wants to play. And I think the way he reacted on Tuesday, I don't think Eli's going to go quietly into the night here.
No, I agree. Too much of a competitor to just walk away this way. Dan, let's talk for a few minutes about what's next for Eli, and then we'll circle back to what's next for this Giants organization that's just in a mess right now. Then the team that keeps coming up, it's a natural fit. It makes almost too much sense not to happen. Is the Jacksonville Jaguars. Tom Coughlin's there. They're a good team with a great defense, and they're just missing a quarterback, and it'll probably haunt them when they get to the playoffs and maybe lose in the first round this year. Is that the spot when you think of where Eli might land next year? Is Jacksonville kind of where your head's at? And by the way, they play the Giants next year, which is just going to be great theater if that happens.
Yeah, I'll get to that in 1 second. I just want to go back to that last topic about the Eli's reaction. I mean, it was like I said, it was tough to see. A lot of fans were saying that. I will say I feel like a little bit the reaction has been a little overblown. I mean, he got benched. He didn't he didn't get diagnosed with the life-threatening illness or anything like that. He's still going to collect his $13 million or whatever it is this year. So I think we need at least keep that somewhat in perspective. I know it's just easy to kind of get swept away, and I mean, seeing his former teammates react, you would think that the Giants like literally put a knife in his back. But I mean, it's tough to see. Like James said, it's an end of an era. But I just think you need at least have to keep that in perspective. That I mean, Eli Manning is going to be okay. I understand that it's sad for fans to see what happened to him and see how it happened, probably more than anything. But I just feel like it's been a little over the top because, I mean, again, everyone knew this day was coming. And if you just look at it from a cold, pragmatic sense, it had to happen. So, like guys really don't get to choose what terms they go out on, as McAdoo said. So I just want to throw that in there. But as far as, what's next for Eli, I mean, the Jaguars are like a blinking red light. I mean, it's just so obvious that would be the logical destination for him. I mean, you have the Tom Coughlin connection. You have a Super Bowl caliber defense. You have a great young running back, some good young wide receivers. It's just such a ready-made fit for a veteran quarterback, a team that's going to need a new quarterback to get them over the hump. One thing I'll say is, had Eli and the Jaguars and everyone known this is how the season was going to unfold, it would have been nice to maybe have some talks around the trade deadline. Because again, I think that we all dismissed that at the time because it just didn't see the Giants ever doing this, at least not so soon. So I'm sure the Jaguars would have loved to have, maybe had a realistic opportunity to pick up Eli for a run this year. Because I mean, they're right there, with the chance with that defense that they have. But I think that's the hands down favorite. Just makes so much sense. The other thing that kind of stands out is Denver. Obviously, it worked for one Manning brother already, so I could see that. I'm sure Peyton would have some good memories to pass along to Eli. That experience. That's another team that desperately needs a quarterback. Maybe not. As they've kind of fallen apart here, maybe not as ready to contend as the Jaguars. But I don't think that team is as bad as things have really spiraled, and I think a lot of their problems have been with the quarterback position. I mean, there's other teams that will become more realistic or less realistic as time goes on. I mean, the really interesting one to me is maybe the Redskins, and then we'll kind of find out just how vindictive maybe Eli is or how hurt he is by this. Because if you go play for the Redskins, that would sting. But if Kirk Cousins leaves, hey, I mean, the Redskins, be in the market for a quarterback, so that would be pretty interesting. And another option too is just retirement. I mean, he's made a ton of money. The difference with him than a lot of aging stars is he's got 2 Super Bowl rings. He doesn't need to go to Jacksonville to chase, an elusive ring. He's already got the 2. I mean, his legacy is cemented. Sure, 3 would be great. And I don't think he will retire because I think he does, still want to play, still feel like he's capable of playing. And I'm sure he's going to have a little motivation to prove the Giants wrong rather than just kind of, walking off and saying, hey, they were right, I can't play anymore. So I don't think that will happen. But I just think it's at least in play because, I mean, maybe he just says, listen, I got my family all settled here. I've had a great career. Like I said, I made a ton of money. Do I really want to go kind of start fresh with some, new franchise and just spend my last couple of years in Jacksonville? I don't know. I mean, that might not be the most appealing thing to him. He doesn't reveal, a lot of those types of feelings. So we're all just kind of guessing. But I think Jacksonville makes a ton of sense. And that would be, if I was putting odds on it, I think we'll be seeing Eli, come to MetLife Stadium, if it's in New Jersey, come to play the Giants next season, which will be absolutely fascinating.
James, I think you tweeted about that this morning, the idea of, I think the game is in New York next year, Jacksonville in MetLife Stadium. Like, could you imagine that scene? Tom Coughlin up in the skybox somewhere, up in one of the booths, and you have Eli Manning against the Giants, and who knows who's on the sideline or the opposing quarterback is. But that would just be a surreal scene, I think, for Giants fans in that building.
It would be insane. And you know what? Dan said he's settled here. He has a home in the Hamptons, a home in Union County. I'm just going to throw it out there. The Jets have not had the season anyone expected them to have. They're not necessarily going to be picking that high. We don't know who's going to declare for the draft. Why not the Jets? Why? I mean, if Eli really wants to stick it to the Giants, I mean, the Redskins are a dysfunctional organization. I could see him not wanting to go there. But look, if you think the Jets are a little bit less, and that, Woody's brother, Chris Johnson seems to be doing a good job, and McCagnon, Bowles is going to be there. He goes to the Jets on a short-term deal. The Jets have some cap space. Maybe they add a player or two. He could be a Jet. Doesn't have to move. He's actually probably closer with his commute from where he lives, getting to Florham Park. I mean, I wouldn't rule the Jets out either. And I think the Jets, for the first time in forever, the Jets are not the embarrassing, NFL team in this area. And they could really stick it to the Giants by signing Eli Manning and treating him well in the final years of career. So I wouldn't rule the Jets out either.
No, I wouldn't either, James. I mean, look, the Jets, I know maybe they've changed a little bit now with McCagnon kind of taking a long-term approach to ththings, but this is the same team that brought in Brett Favre at the end of his career and tried to kind of go for it, with a team that had some talent. It's not crazy. I mean, the Jets they've gone down that route before, trying to bring in a big name and do something out of nowhere. I could see that one. So, Eli's career.
For a year or two.
Yeah.
Because, they've been competitive this year. And if you add some pieces and the quarterback's not there, who knows?
Boy, that'd be something if Eli Manning went to the Jets and won a lot of games and the Giants stunk it up. So Eli's career, we'll see. I think we all think it's probably going to be somewhere else, if not retirement somewhere else next year. But now the Giants, Dan, is they have to – we've been saying this in a lot of different ways for the past 5 or 6 weeks, that it just feels like it's incredible how much season is still left, considering how early this season was, for all intents and purposes, over. I'll use the same sentiment, Dan, on this story. If this was week 16 or week 17, I'd say, all right, this is bad, this is awkward. It's one game of Davis Webb or half of Geno Smith, and then they go to the offseason. They have 5 games left. What? I mean, first of all, how do you think this team is going to respond to this? I know his ex-teammates have been in support of Eli. I can't even have a sense of what the team feels, especially because they don't seem to like McAdoo anyway, of them benching their leader. I have no idea what to expect from them from an effort and performance standpoint on Sunday against the Raiders. No idea.
Yeah, well, I'll say this. It wasn't, like I said, there wasn't very many of the veterans in the locker room yesterday. Tuesday is kind of a weird day where guys can, scoot out of there right after the walkthrough ends, so there's not a lot of guys hanging around. So the young guys, they don't know. They just really don't have any concept of what's going on. To them, it's like, oh, they changed the quarterback. Okay, I still got to go out and play hard. They don't really grasp the big picture. It'll be much more interesting to find out or hear from guys like Zach Diossi or Jonathan Casillas or Justin Pugh, those types of guys who have been around, understand what Eli means to the franchise, understand what it means to move on from a franchise quarterback, all these types of things. Those are the guys it'll be interesting to hear from. But with the way this team has been so dysfunctional, I'm not expecting anything really earth-shattering to come out of them. These guys have put on the blinders to so much stuff. We've killed them for not having any leaders all season. You got Damon Harrison getting in beefs with Carl Banks on Twitter last night. These guys are just kind of so clueless, and I'm not expecting any. I think they're going to take it in stride because they just don't know any better. You had JPP cackling in the background while Eli's pouring his heart out yesterday. These guys just seem to have no perspective. One thing that stood out to me is, these guys Instagram or tweet anytime, their favorite song comes on or they wake up in the morning, they have to tweet about it. Nobody said anything about Eli today. I think Brandon Marshall, again, who's a veteran guy who's been around, who understands things, is the only player I've seen put anything on social media, at least acknowledging, just how big of a thing this was. And he said something like, I wish I had been better for you to Eli. Nobody else. These guys they're tweeting and Instagramming them getting, free gear from some sponsor, but not an acknowledgement of, what just happened, which was a, franchise altering move yesterday, which again, I just think just shows a lot of these guys are immature and obviously self-involved, because you contrast that with the guys who won the Super Bowls with Eli and really went through the battles with them, they're pouring their hearts out. I mean, these guys, some of these guys, David Deal, Sean O'Hara, they collect checks from the Giants and they're crushing the organization, and not even just Ben McAdoo. They're crushing all the way up to John Mara, which it's a little bit of a conflict of interest, I guess, but I tip my cap for them not holding back, and not fearing that they could maybe lose their cushy gig, working for the Giants, because they're just saying what they feel. So I think that is what kind of speaks volumes to me, is just the disconnect with the former players who, won Super Bowls with Eli, understand his value. This current team is just such a joke that I don't trust them to have a proper reaction. I think they'll all just say, hey, it's Ben's decision. Got to do what I got to do. I mean, they got guys who, weren't trying, long before anything happened with Eli Manning. So I don't think we can expect the effort to really be much different against the Raiders. I think it'll just kind of be more of the same.
What I think is going to be very interesting to see is those former players. Do these guys look? The Giants love to trot these guys out and thump their chest about Giants pride and everything. Do these guys tell the Giants to go shove it and go away? Because I think that's something. I mean, we've seen this happen with the Yankees, where people are not happy. I mean, Yogi wasn't associated with the Yankees for like 20 years because of what George did to him. I mean, is this that sort of moment where people, maybe not necessarily Eli, but Eli's former teammates say, to hell with the Giants. And there's a lot of, scar. I mean, look, this is sports, and in many ways it's an escape, and these guys have made a ton of money playing a kid's game, but scars can last a long time. And I just wonder if this was such a seismic occurrence that you're going to see some of these former Giants, guys who were always around, pull away from the franchise because of the way they treated Eli. It almost feels like, in a way, like Eli, it just embodies everything that these guys felt about the Giants organization. And now they see him treated this way, and they just don't want to maybe associate with the Giants anymore.
I mean, I think that might be the initial thing. I think cooler heads will prevail. I mean, I'm sure a bunch of these guys were irate when Coughlin got pushed out the door, and they still came around. And I think Eli will probably handle this well. And I think that over time, some of these feelings will definitely dissipate. And again, I think guys will realize, hey, if I'm collecting a check from the Giants, I'm not going to let the grudge, get too carried away. I think once kind of the shock of it all kind of dies down, I don't think it'll be, because at the end of the day, it's, it is just a football decision. They didn't, literally, put Eli out to pasture. And when I was covering Rutgers, there was, they fired the really popular athletic director, Tim Pernetti, after the Mike Rice thing, and tons of former players were outraged and said, they didn't, never anything to do with the program again. And, they all pretty much came back. So I don't think this will have long-term effects like that, but I definitely think, in the short term here, it's going to be kind of awkward for the Giants to deal with it, and maybe you won't see quite as much of that, alumni pride and, on the sidelines or however else they kind of trot these guys out. But I would think by next year, you're probably going to have a new coach, a new GM, which will kind of help, move away from this kind of dark time. And I would assume that, these wounds will heal over time.
So moving forward now, let's take it from the Giants' perspective to end this. Just logistically, as this season comes down the stretch, James, I saw some of your tweets about the way the Giants might have to handle things in terms of the depth chart, in terms of who dresses, who doesn't. Geno Smith starts on Sunday. Is Eli Manning going to be his backup and has to come in the game? Like, let's just say Geno Smith gets his bell rung and he's a concussion protocol, which obviously the NFL takes more seriously now. You can't just leave a quarterback in there after he gets a big hit to the head. Is Eli going to have to come in the game? And then let's look forward to it when Davis Webb starts. Does Geno back him? Does Eli dress? Like, what does this look like for the next 5 weeks?
I have no idea. And it just goes back to the whole thing that I just don't think that these guys think anything through.
They don't have any idea either, I bet. They don't just make it up as they go along.
It's all like, I didn't say he was going to be active. I mean, look at it this way. If Geno Smith gets hurt and Ben McAdoo has to turn to Eli Manning, he's got some stones on him to say, hey, Eli, go in there. And what happens if Eli leads a comeback and they beat the Raiders? I mean, this is just, I don't see how they can actually, maybe it's just Ben just talking nonsense, but I don't see how you can have Eli be the backup. It's mind-boggling. And what are they going to have Eli run a scout team the rest of the season now?
Oh gosh.
I mean, this is just like, look, I get, and I honestly think that if you had gone to Eli and said, look, we gotta play Davis, Eli probably would have gotten that, and maybe Eli would have said, I will stand behind Davis as a backup. But I mean, this is just it's not Geno's fault. Geno is in a really bad spot because he's getting an opportunity, which I'm sure he is happy for, but it's going to be a quick opportunity. And he's only getting it because this team was so incompetent and did not get Davis Webb ready weeks ago when they should have. So, hey, you know what? I mean, maybe Eli will go in as a backup. I have a very hard time imagining how the Giants could put Eli Manning back on the field. And even if they want to say, we're going to give him a swan song, at the end of the game against the Redskins in Week 17, I bet you he says no. So, look, the Giants, if that's their plan, they better hope that Eli is going to be the professional that he's always been. Because if I were Eli Manning and they told me, hey, or if Geno throws 4 picks in the first half, hey, get in there, I would tell Ben, no, you got to evaluate. Remember, bud?
So, Dan, off of what James just said, there's a chance here, depending on how they structure this, that this whole thing gets more embarrassing between now and the end of the season?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually writing something right now. You guys are stealing my thunder. I'll have to post it before I post the podcast. But that's the nightmare scenario. That's the most embarrassing scenario imaginable. That Geno Smith rolls his ankle in the third quarter with the Giants down 31-3, and Eli Manning has to trudge out onto the field in the black hole to finish, the mess someone else created. And I can't. I mean, you keep thinking everything can't get worse this season. I can't imagine a more humiliating way. If you think the way they treated him yesterday was bad, that would be the worst of the worst. So, again, it goes back to the failure, though, to not get Davis Webb ready to at least be the number 2 quarterback. I mean, the idea that, again, you have Eli as the number 2 quarterback this week is unfathomable. And then, as James said, that would be the ultimate indignity that he's going to have to run the scout team offense. I mean, you can't do that to the guy either. I mean, he's going to have to just hold a clipboard for the rest of the year. Don't dress him on game days. Just let's not try and carry on this charade, any longer. And the thing that we have to kind of, if you want to spin forward a little bit more, now who's the quarterback in 2018? Because I fully expected they were going to ride it out with Eli for one more year, no matter what happened. That way you draft, Josh Rosen, whoever, let him apprentice under Eli for a year, and then in 2 years let that guy take over. Even if it was going to be Davis Webb, I don't think anyone thinks Davis Webb is going to be, ready, to run the show the start of next season. But now you're really at ground zero because, for whatever they want to say about Geno Smith, there's no chance Geno Smith is going to be the starting quarterback in 2018. Because you also have to remember, as bad as this season has been, this is a team that, conceivably, could get back to the playoffs because they'll have all these guys, who have been hurt come back. And, assuming a new coach is able to get, the team to buy back in. This isn't a total rebuild where you're going to just, take your lumps with a rookie quarterback while you have Odell Beckham in the final year of his contract and guys like Vernon and Snacks and Jenkins and JPP all getting older. You're not going to just, pack it in. They're not in that mode. So I have no clue, talk about odds. Who's the starting quarterback for the New York Giants, week 1 next year? I have no clue. Because, again, I thought it would be Eli, and then the clock would really be ticking, and he'd be gone at the start of 2019. They've clearly accelerated that clock to a point where, now they have a huge gaping hole. Now they basically have to take a quarterback in the top 3. I think if you had Eli, you maybe could have said, well, we can take something else and give Davis Webb another year to develop as the number 2 guy, something like that. But now their hands are tied. I feel like they have to take a quarterback. They might not get a chance to get one of these top 2 guys if they stay where they're at. So just another situation as I start to, play that on my mind. They probably botched that one too. So, again, no surprise.
They botched it all. We'll end with this. Here's a list I just found here of free agent quarterbacks. Let's assume they're going to take a quarterback with that top pick, whatever pick it's going to be. But a lot of times teams don't want to start that guy day 1 next season. So if Eli is gone and Geno's gone and they draft a quarterback, they might want one of these guys that's just a stopgap to start for a few games. Ready? Here's a list, guys, assuming they're not going to dive in the Breeze or Kirk Cousins area because they're going to draft a quarterback. Here's potential quarterbacks you guys might cover week 1, 2018. Josh McCown, Jay Cutler, Sam Bradford, Drew Stanton, Chad Henne, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Derek Anderson, Mark Sanchez. There you go.
I think I'd take Eli over that group.
Yeah, I would too. What do you think, James?
Yeah. I mean, no, I think it's right. I mean, who would you take? I guess maybe you take Fitz. I don't know. I can't imagine Josh McCown is. I mean, yeah, it's just if it's Sam Bradford, we got to get Elliott up here. We got to bring him back into the. He's got to join the Giants. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, I got no answers. It's just maybe Eli probably, I get that. But to do it this way is just, who that I just was like, look, I mean, they could have let Eli play the rest of the way, because here's the thing, like, what are we really going to learn from Davis Webb with no offensive weapons and a bad offensive line?
Nothing
over the final 4 games. Okay, great. And like the worst thing that happens if he looks great and they convince themselves he's the future, and then he doesn't pan out. I mean, look, the Giants have only had a top 5 pick, I think, like 12 times in franchise history. This is something that, amazingly, for all their issues over the years, they don't get a lot. So I just feel like, if you're really gonna go out there with Josh McCown or Ryan Fitzpatrick starting the first 10, 12 games next season before you turn it over to the draft pick, if you decide not to go with Webb, I mean, why did you just do that with Eli? I mean, why?
Yeah, I get to see it now. I could see you guys writing like what week will Josh Rosen take the job from Drew Stanton? Will it be
exactly.
2, week 3?
But my point is, like, but I mean, like, you probably could have done that with Eli.
Yeah, that's what I was expecting to happen.
You may have even been able to tell Eli, hey, look, we're going to start Webb the last 2 games, and then or whatever, and then we'll bring you back. I mean, it's just like they could. It's just, look, hey, the Giants have made their bed. Eli Manning era is over. We can agree or disagree with how they did it. They did it. It's over. They're done. What's next?
Because now they have to go lie in it, and now it's not good. I mean, the Giants situation is dire. I bet on Eli next year over I bet on the Giants, and we'll see where this goes. Guys, you have 5 games to cover left. It starts with Sunday in Oakland. I have no idea what to expect. All I know is when I turn that TV on at 4:25, and you guys will be out there, obviously local time, at around 1:25. Geno Smith will be under center. Eli Manning will be at the sidelines. It's going to be surreal. This has been a podcast I didn't think we'd have this year, but it happened. It's here. We're here now, and the Giants are going to have to deal with the fallout. James, appreciate it, and enjoyed this one.
You got it, Joe. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, Joe, they're certainly giving us plenty to talk about on the podcast, so we can at least thank them for that.
That's for sure. Yeah, we don't lack for content here. They give us a lot to talk about. And for Giants fans, though, listen, we appreciate it. It's been a rough year. We get that, but appreciate you being with us throughout it. And we'll be back next week to talk about the Geno Smith era, or maybe if Davis Webb gets in the game, we'll talk about that and the fallout as well. Thanks for listening right here on NJ.com.